I have to start by thanking my ancestors for paving the way for me to be here today, especially my grandmother, Kofi Green, who's one of the greatest civil rights leaders in Los Angeles history. She was born in Arkansas to a mother who was a sharecropper, and her father, her grandfather, was born into slavery on a plantation in Georgia. I also have to thank you for this practice of dynamic mindfulness that I'm so excited to be here to share with you today. That's radically changed my life for the better, and I've seen the benefits in the lives of the children that I work with in schools and universities across the nation. We call it D-Mind for short, which is a mindful secular yoga. And I'm here to argue that it's an optimal solution we can use to help dismantle the school-to-prison pipeline, end mass incarceration, and begin to heal from the intergenerational trauma that we all suffer from, and something that I know a little bit about. You see, although I'm a professor now, I didn't always believe that I would live to see 21. Because I grew up in Los Angeles during the crack era epidemic, I witnessed things like my sister's boyfriend shot in a drive-by shooting. I saw tanks in the city of Los Angeles burning during the uprisings after the Rodney King beating. I didn't believe that I would live to be 21 years old. Think about that for a moment. Think about the anxiety and stress that produces in the body. From police terrorism to police murders, mass incarceration, microaggressions, all of these types of trauma get stored in our bodies. Or as we say at the Niroga Institute, we store our issues in our tissues. Or, as Du Bois so poignantly pointed out over a century ago in The Souls of Black Folks, when he asked, how does it feel to be a problem? I can tell you, not very good. But I was lucky. My family, my grandmother, she instilled in me a sort of resiliency. She shared with me her faith and her social activism, which was largely rooted in the Baptist church. And my mother, who's European American, used her racial privilege to fight so that I could be in all honors classes in public school and then attend an elite prep school. And then she coached me on how I could use football to get myself into the Ivy League, where I went to Brown. The support and resiliency my family gave me, it enabled me to go on further to graduate school at Brown, at Harvard, and then Berkeley, PhD. And even their support helped me get through the tenure process here at UMass, which had some of its stresses of its own, to say the least. But none of that compared to when I got divorced and the stress became unbearable. And I slipped into a depression. And what that looked like for me was abuse of alcohol and other unhealthy coping mechanisms. And that's when I turned to yoga. I had tried yoga a few times at retreats here in Western Massachusetts with community organizers at the Julius Ford, Harriet Tubman Healthy Living Community. Yoga is what I call a mindful meditation or moving meditation. And I practiced a 5-minute sun salutation for 1 year, every single day, something I encourage you all to try. And it rewired my brain in ways that I'm still sort of coming to understand now. Essentially, the the high levels of anxiety that I had gained as a child from my background and that depression were reduced to almost non-existent levels. And I developed healthy coping mechanisms. And that's when I arrived at the Niroga Institute on my sabbatical in Oakland, California. I was there to write the book about my grandmother, the first biography written about this great civil rights leader. But while I was there, I needed to practice my yoga. And the Niroga Institute, I found out two important things I want to share with you today. First, both people who are incarcerated as well as prison guards, they both like yoga. I was shocked to hear this. I had never heard of anything these two constituencies got along or agreed on. And the second thing I learned was that the Niroga Institute was sharing this practice in the urban public schools with black and brown children and teaching them how to use yoga to dismantle and resist the school-to-prison pipeline. So what Niroga was doing, essentially, was using trauma-informed dynamic mindfulness to build in these students the resiliency that my own family had built up and cultivated within me. So I set out to help these kids. I wanted to do something that could help these children. I had always wanted to do something to dismantle the prison system that incarcerates so many of our children. But because of my background, I was scared to even go near prisons or jails. But in this way, I knew I could actually make a difference. And so fast forward to present day. I had been teaching all subjects for 20 years. Every subject from math, history, computers, African American history. Even here at UMass, I teach a course called Hip Hop, Nation, Language, and Literacy Practices, where I try to get my students to develop what I call a critical social justice hip hop pedagogy. And all of that has been great, but none of it is powerful as the dynamic mindfulness. And this is a picture of my students. So when BK, the executive director of the Niroga Institute, asked, would I be interested in helping start a new program here in New Jersey, in the Jersey City Public Schools, I jumped at the opportunity. I said, not only will I do it, but this work will be the centerpiece of my life's work from here on. So when I got to Jersey and met these students, I was very happy to meet an incredible group of creative, talented students, many of whom had part-time jobs, working in retail sales, early childhood education, and even one was a firefighter. And they immediately took to the practice. They soaked it up. They loved it. They saw the benefits in their own lives right from the jump. But these students, like many of our students nationwide, were exposed to high levels of gun violence, just as I had experienced in Los Angeles. From Parkland to Newtown, Connecticut, this is becoming, unfortunately, all too common. And so this practice of dynamic mindfulness that I'm going to share with you can address this. Think about the anxiety, stress, and trauma that's produced in our students' bodies when they're exposed to these type of violence actions. In the school that I work in Jersey City, in the past 2 years, 2 students have been killed, 1 each year. Again, imagine, think for just a moment, what does that do to the student's body? What type of stress, what type of trauma are our students being exposed to? So what I want to do here today with you is to share a bit of this dynamic mindfulness practice. We call it the ABCs of D-Mind. beginning with A, action. The movement gets at the trauma that we store in our tissues. The B is for breathing, and the breathing helps regulate our emotions. And the C is for centering. And centering is important because it gets our mind to focus on the present rather than what happened in the past or what we're worried about will happen in the future. Or as Lao Tzu says so articulately, depression lives in the past, anxiety lives in the future, but peace lives in the present. So I invite you to try a bit of this practice with me. I invite you to sit with your feet flat on the floor, relax your hands. If you feel comfortable, you can have your hands on your lap, up or down. Sit up with the crown of your head up toward the sky, and just lower your gaze. You can look down at the floor, and if you feel comfortable enough, feel free to close your eyes. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to ring this chime. And when I ring it, I want you to listen. Listen to the sound of the chime as long as you can. And when you can no longer hear it, I invite you to raise your hand. Great, thank you. Now I'm going to invite you to try to integrate a bit of the breath and the movement. So I invite you to bring your hands out in front of you like this. And as you inhale for 4 seconds, open up. And as you exhale for 8 seconds, go ahead and close. Okay, so let's do that together. Inhale for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. And exhale for 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Again, inhale 4. And exhale for 8. Do one more on your own. Thank you. Could I see a quick show of hands of how many more people feel more relaxed, calm, and focused? Wow, that's incredible. These are the typical results I get from many of the students and faculty and teachers I work with at schools and in universities. And imagine, we only did that practice for barely a minute. But as Thich Nhat Hanh says, if you can end suffering just for one moment, isn't it worth it? And so this practice is so powerful, and the impact are so serious and so real that these students, a group of 12 students, volunteer their time to go and lead the practice out at nearby elementary schools. We call them culture keepers. And this group of culture keepers lead this practice, like I said. And I have one story I want to share with you that just demonstrates a little bit of the power of this practice. Like I said, on a couple times per semester, this group of culture keepers goes to a nearby elementary school or middle school to lead the practice. On one Monday, we were scheduled to lead the practice, but we found out, all of us, the kids included, that one of their classmates had been murdered during the weekend. A female student. When I walked into the school building that Monday morning, I could see the tears, the sadness on the teachers' faces and the students' faces. Utter despair. On that morning, something happened that I had never seen happen in that school before. A student picked up the chime that sits in the principal's office, took it to the intercom system so all the school could hear, and rang it, and asked everyone in the school to take 3 deep breaths. After that, we asked the students, the culture keepers, we said, do you still want to go to this elementary school this afternoon to lead this practice? And the students said, yes, absolutely. They said, not only do we want to go lead this practice, we need to go lead this practice for our own health, for our own healing. And we want to share this practice with these younger children. There are many more stories I could tell you about the power of this practice, like how these students go out in their community and share it with their coworkers at work, or how they share it with their families, their grandparents, their aunts and uncles, their younger siblings. Or I could tell you about how I lead this practice here at the university, at the College of Education, large meetings of faculty, students, and staff, especially after the 2016 election. That day I had to lead 2 sessions. Or in my personal life, how I cured myself of sciatica. Or how through the practice I found my life partner who's sitting in the audience with us today in the front row. The societal benefits are enormous. Think of the possibilities. If we integrated D-Mind into how we raise our children at every level. Think, imagine. Kids who feel less anxiety in school, stay in school. Kids who stay in school don't shoot it up or burn it down. This saves society billions of dollars. We don't have to spend on dropout rates and juvenile incarceration. All of this can be done in public schools for less than the cost of a football. $20 per year per child. We can bring this to all of our students. Please join together with me in this movement from the Niroga Institute for 1 million mindful children we're trying to build. Imagine the ripple effects of millions of mindful children. It could create generational transformation. To create this new world requires a new way of thinking. We have to change the way we see yoga. Instead of it being in the domain exclusively of wealthy people who can afford private classes in private studios, we've got to bring this practice here to the public universities, to the public schools, to everywhere, the people who need it the most. Help us end mass incarceration. Help us dismantle this school-to-prison pipeline. Let's help end intergenerational trauma and heal from intergenerational trauma. I know it can change the lives of these students just like it changed my life. Thank you. Namaste. And aloha.